David Hirsch, senior lecturer in sociology at Goldsmiths, argues that the hostile environment in parts of academia is not recognised as such in the mainstream of academia. He says that is why the new Centre for the Study of Contemporary Anti-Semitism, of which he is now the founding director, is necessary.
Thank you very much to everybody who has said nice things about me. It's a very strange life, actually. I did 3 seminars on Thursday with first years, with MA students, and I enjoyed it so much. And the reason I enjoyed it so much was because they just treated me as a kind of ordinary academic. They listened to me, they interacted with me, they asked me questions. I was just treated with a kind of ordinary respect. And it was such a pleasure. And, you know, today everybody's been very lovely. But what I want to do is to try to explain why that feels like such a relief, why it feels like something that's unusual. What is it about universities and about academics and about our kinds of disciplines that creates a hostile environment? Hannah Arendt talked about the temporary alliance between the elite and the mob. And I think for certain, the anti-Semitism that we're talking about is mostly an elite phenomenon. It's in our world. It's, you know, professors and intellectuals and artists and people who work in journalism and teaching and the rest of it. They have not quite been successful in finding their mob. Other people possibly have found their mob, but they haven't. So the first thing I want to say is that there is an absolute sense, a kind of tradition of clever people, radical people being anti-Semitic. And this is something that actually people do not understand. This, I mean, I give you this just as an example of what I'm talking about. I did a talk in in Konstanz in Germany. I keep wanting to say Kronstadt. I don't know why. In Konstanz, and I just wrote this: anti-Semitism, including in its radical and anti-hegemonic forms, has been embraced and tolerated in German universities in the past. Anti-Zionism, the projection of a Jewish face onto the evils of imperialism and racism, was an official ideology in the DDR, and it is on the rise again today, largely re-imported from the UK and the US, partially via Israel and via Israeli Jewish anti-Zionism, which is, I mean, I have seen Israeli anti-Zionists kind of bullying German people who oppose anti-Semitism, German intellectuals who stand up against anti-Semitism, and telling them, how dare you tell me, an Israeli, what to think about anti-Semitism. So all kinds of very strange reversals going on. Anti-Zionism constructs its own caricature of Israel, onto which it projects all that post-national Europe wishes that it had transcended: racism, ethnic nationalism, colonialism. This is all borrowed from Robert Fine, who is completely an elephant in this room and has been all afternoon. That's nothing specific about Germany. Of course, one could tell the same story about France and about Britain, and increasingly about America, actually. So firstly, people imagine anti-Semites have Nazi uniforms or they are skinheads, but actually there is a really important and long tradition of anti-Semites who are clever, articulate, sexy, and radical. And we need to understand that, and we need to keep our eyes on that. Anti-Semitism is a significant issue, which, in keeping with the logic of anti-Zionism, as David just kind of put it out in a really coherent way, David's been very influential on me on this. is often absent from today's discussions about diversity and inclusion on campus. Thanks, Mira, for the story. So that was, I just give you that as a random thing that I happened to do this week. And I give it to you in order to make the point that what happens in universities is worrying and it's significant, I think. Let me try and move on. And I want to make this point too, very, very simply, there is an authentically left-wing anti-Semitism, because many people just, you've lost them already, right? If you say there is a left anti-Semitism, they say, but the left is against anti-Semitism, and therefore, if somebody is anti-Semitic, they must come from the right. And this was the Corbyn argument. Well, there's anti-Semitism in society in general, and some of it will, you know, randomly be in the Labour Party. A complete refusal to listen to what was being said, to listen to the critique. It's kind of astonishing. So Moish Postone, thank you, Moish, tells us anti-Semitism can appear to be anti-hegemonic. As a fetishized form of oppositional consciousness, it is particularly dangerous because it appears to be the expression of a movement of the little people against an intangible global form of domination. And this is an authentically left-wing tradition. It's not the only left tradition. It's always been challenged, but it is a long tradition and it is authentically left. And the left does not educate its people about their own history. You know, the time of Marx and Bruno Bauer, Bebel and the Socialism of Fools, it's all been mentioned today, Hobson, Lenin, Corbyn, who wrote the big preface for Hobson's book recently, the story of Soviet anti-Semitism and the Slansky trial, and Poland and East Germany 20 years after the Holocaust, and there was an anti-Zionist movement holding Jews in Germany and Poland to be responsible for imperialism and racism and apartheid. So that's how Moish puts it. Bart says this: anti-Semitism is not the cry of the oppressed. And we've seen this a lot recently with the rise of populist politics. We've seen people who want to portray anti-Semitism as a kind of authentic, unmediated cry of the oppressed, as we've seen people trying to portray racism and xenophobia as the kind of authentic cry of the so-called white working class. The populist movements are on the rise. They are fundamentally contemptuous of the democratic state. They are fundamentally conspiracy fantasy. They fantasize a liberal, metropolitan, globalist, educated elite, which pretends to be nice, pretends to be liberal, but really oppresses you. And the discourses of anti-racism and anti-Semitism in this narrative have been portrayed as discourses of power, discourses of the powerful, created by this cunning liberal elite to keep the working class down, or to keep the Palestinians oppressed. David, I think, gosh, now I'm ashamed because I don't know if David actually mentioned the hyphens and the not hyphens. I'm sure he did, but I was trying to think about my my paper. Sorry, David. This is the anti-Zionism without the hyphen. This is David Miller. We've heard a lot about David Miller today as well. Zionism, he says, is and always has been a racist, violent, imperialist ideology premised on ethnic cleansing, endemically anti-Arab and Islamophobic, has no place in any society. The Union of Jewish Students is bound to promoting it. This campaign of censorship renders Arab and Muslim students, as well as anti-Zionist Jewish students, unsafe. See what he does there? He reverses the hostile environment and says that it is Zionism that creates a hostile environment for Muslims and for anti-Zionist Jews, actually. in other words, for Jews who embrace anti-Semitic politics. It's a kind of astonishing little paragraph. Anthony Julius said that anti-Semites self-define as not anti-Semitic, and that's taken in good coin. So you ask, Jeremy Corbyn, is it true that you're anti-Semitic? And he says, no, absolutely not. I loathe all anti-Semitism. And that's the end of the interview. But at the same time, anti-Semitism does not afford self-definition to Jews, and it does it in this way. Jews have many, many diverse understandings of their own politics and their own relationship to Israel and to Zionism. Some of them are critical, some of them are supportive, but most Jews have some kind of relationship between themselves and the half of the world's Jews who live in Israel. But anti-Zionism abrogates to itself the right to say what the meaning of that relationship is. And it says, either you accept that your Zionism or your connection to the state of Israel is racism, is apartheid, is colonialism, is Islamophobic, is racist. Either you accept that, if you accept that, then if you accept that in the words that I've offered you, then you can have an exemption from this view that defines Jews as being racist, apartheid, and the rest of it. Sorry, that wasn't very clear, but I think you see what I mean. What I'm saying is that Jews, if you ask them what they believe, they will self-define, they will explain what they think about themselves and Israel, and it won't be mad, and it won't be racist, and it won't be that they support apartheid in general. But that's not accepted, because our word is not accepted. Instead, just as racism constructs race, so anti-Zionism constructs Zionists, and that's us. And it constructs us as racist, colonialist, and the rest of it. This is one of David Miller's diagrams. David Miller is the expert in the Jews, just as many anti-Semites have been in the past. And of course, the joke is always, he gets it all wrong. It's a rubbish diagram. It makes no sense. But David Miller is not a single crank. In order to become a professor, you need committees to promote you to senior lecturer and to reader and to a chair. You need peer reviewers to say that your work is of high quality. You need funding bodies to decide that your work is worth spending. In Miller's case, Miller has been involved in something like £400,000 worth of funding from the British state alone. It didn't all go to him, but in his projects. And then you have people who jump to his defense. This is the motion that was passed at Leslie Claff's UCU branch the other day. It is with dismay that this branch of UCU and its academic staff have learned that the University of Bristol has sacked Professor David Miller. In so doing, it has relinquished the right to describe itself as a university. Miller has been accused of anti-Semitism because of his criticisms of Israel and of Zionism. I've just read the kinds of things that Miller says. They are many things, but they are not criticisms of Israel and Zionism. And he has been sacked, or he has been accused, because he named a student organization as acting in the interest of a foreign state. He didn't do that. He said that Jewish students were assets of Israel, were paid agents of the Israeli state, and their job was to... So you understand the difference between criticism of Israel and anti-Semitism. And the UCU motion is very clearly along the pattern of the Livingston formulation. Not only is Miller's work not anti-Semitic, Miller's work is great. And not only have the people who have accused him got it wrong, but they've accused him of getting it wrong knowingly and consciously. As Ken Livingstone said, for far too long, the accusation of anti-Semitism has been used. It's not an accident, it's not a misjudgment, has been used against anyone who is critical of the policies of the Israeli government. This is a loyalty test that was going around. Somebody, Karin, earlier mentioned the loyalty test that was signed by gender studies departments up and down the world. Over 100 departments signed it. This is the very simplest bones of the loyalty test that was going around in May all over the place. It was a tweet. I am an academic and I call for a free Palestine and an end to the Israeli state's apartheid. Free Palestine meaning an end to the Israeli state's apartheid. This is integral to both my moral worldview and my scholarship. In other words, the idea that Israel is at its heart and in its essence racist and must be dismantled in order to produce a free Palestine. This idea is integral to my moral worldview. In other words, it's integral to my whole humanity and to my scholarship. And the next bit is important, pass it on. Pass it to everybody. Everybody should tweet it. And if you don't tweet it, then you are not a moral person and you are not a scholar. So we could talk a lot about hostile environments. The UK government created a hostile environment on purpose for illegal migrants. And everybody knew that in reality, what they created was a hostile environment for anyone who may be assumed to be or who may be constructed as an illegal migrant. And most of you know how that turned out. I love this quote from Sarah's paper, talking about trying to talk to people about Ken Loach, the man who directed Perdition. Sarah said, however, when I tried to air some of these problems about Ken Loach in conversation with UCU activists, I encountered a sense of honest bewilderment that I could possibly have any objection to Ken Loach. Why? Because Loach is a good guy. And that is the nature of the hostile environment. And Julius lays it all out, actually. Anything goes in the condemnation of Jewish commitments, blah, 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 and the rest of it. I want to say, I think there is a crisis at the moment, not only on campus, but also even, or should I say maybe especially, in Jewish academia, Jewish studies, in anti-Semitism studies. Eve went through this already, and Eve explained the problem. And the problem is simply that the Jerusalem Declaration takes the key elements of contemporary anti-Zionism, which is an anti-Jewish ideology, as David says, BDS, Israel eliminationism, disproportionate and intemperate speech, singling out Israel, double standards, analogies, apartheid, Nazism, settler colonialism. It takes these elements and it says, in and of themselves, they are not anti-Semitic. But of course, nobody asked whether they're anti-Semitic in and of themselves. They asked whether, in reality, in the social movements within which they actually exist, are they then anti-Semitic? And that's an empirical question. So this kind of denial of the key elements by significant sections of academia and Jewish academia too, I think is very important. So let me just finish. Honestly, so we need to do something about it. We need to create a space where we can work. I mean, I'm trying to work out who are the academics who are working on contemporary anti-Semitism at the moment and who are teaching on it in Britain. I don't know. I mean, there's me, there's David Seymour, there's Leslie Claff, there's Daniel Allington. There's a number of other academics, many of whom are here, who actually earn their living doing something else, right? You know, working on other things. They do not earn their living doing this work because it's becoming impossible. So we need to change that. We need to create a community of scholars. We need to formalize our networks. We need to do research projects that can write and explain and critique the ideological underpinnings of the hostile environment. We need to help a new generation to be able to do that too, and to find jobs in academia. People need funding for their research. People need publications that they can write in, because things are serious. And just to finish off, anyone who's ever read Hannah Arendt would watch what's happening in Belarus at the moment on the borders of the European Union with recognition, actually. And anti-Semitism is a form of appearance of anti-democratic thinking, of anti-democratic thought. And anti-democratic thought is really, really well respected in our universities, and challenging that is part of challenging the anti-Semitic hostile environment. Thank you.